Some objects aren't valuable because of what they are, but because of the moment they belonged to. A small stone, a simple ribbon, a worn-out toy, a folded letter. These become treasures not because of the material they're made of, but because they hold a memory too heavy or too precious to let fade. Ronald Reagan had such an object. A keepsake he hid away for 30 years. Tucked into a wooden box he never opened except to make sure it was still there. He didn't hide it out of shame. He hid it because he wasn't ready to feel what it carried. Long before he became a man known by millions, he was just Ronnie, a boy growing up in Dixon, running along the riverbanks, chasing fireflies in the warm evenings, listening to his mother's gentle voice reading scripture by lamplight. His childhood was full of small joys, but also quiet hurts he rarely shared with anyone. And then one winter night, when he was around 12, something happened that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Something he didn't fully understand until decades later. It was a night that began like any other. The wind howled outside, rattling the loose boards of the small house. Snow gathered in uneven drifts against the porch steps. His father wasn't home yet, and the silence inside felt heavier than usual. His mother was sewing at the table, her hands moving slowly, her eyes drooping with exhaustion. Reagan sat on the floor near the fireplace, whittling a small piece of wood into the shape of a bird, something he had watched his grandfather do before he passed away. He heard the wind push harder against the windows. He heard the old house creak as if shivering. And then he heard it, a soft knock on the back door, not loud, not urgent, just unexpected. He and his mother exchanged glances. No one ever came to the back door at night. Not in the snow. Not in that part of town. His mother wiped her hands on her apron and stood, her face tightening just slightly, the subtle way she always reacted when something unknown approached. "I'll see who it is," she whispered. Reagan felt a small shiver of worry. "Do you want me to come with you?" She offered a gentle smile. "No, sweetheart. Stay here. Keep warm." But he didn't stay put. Not really. He crept quietly to the edge of the hallway, peeking around the corner as she unlocked the back door. When the door opened, a gust of icy wind swept inside, along with a faint glow from the moonlit snow. A man stood on the porch, wrapped in a thin coat, shivering violently. He was young, maybe in his 20s, with eyes that looked like he'd been walking for miles through the storm. "Ma'am," he said, voice weak. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." Reagan's mother didn't flinch. She opened the door wider and motioned him inside. "Come in before you freeze to death," she said softly. The man staggered in, brushing snow from his hair. He was pale, exhausted, but grateful. Reagan stepped back, unsure whether to feel afraid or curious. His mother guided the man to a chair near the fireplace. "Sit, warm yourself." The stranger nodded, teeth chattering. After a moment, he placed a hand over his chest as though something inside him hurt. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I don't mean to trouble you." "You're not troubling anyone," she said firmly. "You're cold and alone. That's enough reason to open a door." The man looked up at her, with eyes full of something Reagan wouldn't understand until he was an adult. Kind of gratitude people carry when life has been unkind for too long. "What's your name?" she asked. The stranger hesitated. "Daniel," he said. Reagan stepped forward slightly. "Where are you coming from?" Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "Farther than I planned." His mother brought him a cup of warm broth. He held it in both hands like it was the most valuable thing he'd ever touched. There was silence for a long time after that, the kind of silence that feels safe, not awkward. The wind howled outside, but inside, the fire crackled softly, warming the cold air and softening the stranger's shivers. After a while, Reagan's mother said, "You look hungry. Have you eaten today?" Daniel swallowed. "Not since morning." She stood, ladled more broth into another cup, and handed it to him. Reagan watched from the edge of the room, studying the stranger, the way his shoulders slumped from exhaustion, the way he blinked slowly as though fighting sleep. Then Daniel's eyes wandered to the small, whittled bird in Reagan's hands. "You made that?" he asked. Reagan nodded shyly. "I'm still learning." "It's good," Daniel said. "You've got a steady hand." Reagan felt a strange warmth rising in his chest at the compliment. No one outside his family had ever said something like that to him after a long moment. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a circular metal object, worn and scratched, with a faded emblem on the front. He turned it over in his hands once before extending it to Reagan. "Here," he said. "I want you to have this." Reagan blinked. "Why?" Daniel smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Because there are moments in life when kindness meets you at the door, and you shouldn't leave empty-handed when that happens." Reagan hesitated, unsure whether to accept it. His mother stepped forward. "Daniel, you don't have to give him anything." "I know," Daniel whispered, "but I want to." Reagan looked down at the object, a pocket compass. Old, dented, but still elegant in its own way. "It belonged to my father," Daniel said quietly. "He gave it to me when I left home. Told me it would keep me pointed in the right direction." He looked into the fire. "Somehow, I still got lost." Reagan held the compass carefully. The metal was cold, but it warmed quickly in his hands. "Maybe you can put it to better use than I did," Daniel murmured. "Maybe you'll listen to it." Reagan's mother watched the exchange with soft, sad eyes. "Where will you go now?" she asked Daniel. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I just needed to get through tonight." "You can rest here until the storm passes," she offered. Daniel's eyes glistened with gratitude. "Thank you." He settled onto a blanket near the fire. A few minutes later, his breathing slowed, deepened, and he fell asleep, but not peacefully. He murmured softly, shifting, as though his dreams were still full of cold roads and empty miles. Reagan sat nearby, holding the compass, turning it over in his hand again and again. Something about it felt important, not because it was valuable, but because Daniel had parted with it. Because Daniel had believed it might help someone else. Reagan wasn't sure he understood why the gift mattered so much, but he felt it in his chest, in his breath, in the heaviness of the moment. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Reagan couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's words. "Maybe you'll listen to it." But listen to what? The compass made no sound. Still, he felt something shift inside him. The next morning, Daniel was gone. He had left quietly, leaving behind only a folded note on the table. "Thank you for saving me from the cold for one night. Keep the compass. It's yours now." Daniel Reagan carried the note in his pocket for months. The compass stayed on his nightstand, then in his drawer, then wrapped in a handkerchief inside a small wooden box. As years passed, he moved that box from room to room, house to house, but never opened it. Not because he forgot, but because he remembered too well. He wasn't ready to face whatever that night meant. And so the compass, the keepsake, slept inside the box for 30 years. 30 years of unopened memory. 30 years of waiting. For 30 years, the wooden box followed Reagan everywhere. Through cramped rooms and hopeful beginnings. Through radio stations and stage sets. Through small apartments and larger homes. From the restlessness of youth into the responsibilities of adulthood. But it was never opened. Not once. He kept it on high shelves, in bottom drawers, under beds, in closets. Wherever he lived, he always knew exactly where the box was. Even if he pretended not to think about it, there were nights when he stood near it, hand hovering inches above the lid, feeling the weight of the memory inside. But every time, something inside him pulled back. The compass wasn't just metal and glass. It was a moment he wasn't ready to revisit, because deep down, he didn't understand what Daniel had meant. Maybe you'll listen to it. How do you listen to something that never makes a sound? As the years passed, Reagan built his life piece by piece, a career, friendships, purpose. But no matter how full his life became, there was a quiet corner inside him that still held the boy from that snowy night, sitting beside a stranger who had carried too much cold for too long. There's a strange thing about childhood moments we don't understand. They stay alive inside us until we're ready to meet them again. And Reagan would meet this one sooner than he expected. It happened during a move, another house. Another chapter, a transition that left the living room full of boxes stacked like small towers, waiting to be unpacked. Nancy was directing the placement of furniture with her usual gentle decisiveness. Reagan was opening and closing drawers, trying to remember where everything belonged, and then his hand brushed against something familiar, the wooden box. It was smaller than he remembered, worn along the edges, as if the years had been rubbing their thumb against it. Dust gathered in the carved grooves along the lid. Nancy noticed the sudden stillness in his posture. "Ronnie?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. He lifted the box, feeling its surprising weight. "You've had that for as long as I've known you," Nancy said, stepping closer. "I don't think I've ever seen you open it." Reagan's throat tightened. "You haven't. Is it something private?" "Yes, and no," he said. "It's something old." Nancy watched him carefully, understanding the way someone who knows the rhythms of another person's heart does. "You don't have to open it if it hurts." Reagan looked at her, really looked, and saw not pressure, not curiosity, but warmth, safety, a place to set something heavy down. "I think," he whispered. "It's time." Nancy nodded gently and placed a hand over his. "Then open it when you're ready." He carried the box to a small wooden table by the window. Evening light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, dust particles drifting lazily in the warm air. Reagan sat down and rested his hands on the lid, feeling the texture of the wood. The grooves worn smooth from decades of being moved, but never touched inside. His breath deepened, his chest tightened. Nancy sat nearby, quiet, present, and then slowly, almost reverently, Reagan opened the lid. The hinges creaked in protest, unused for 3 decades. Inside lay the compass, wrapped in the same handkerchief he had placed it in when he was a boy, yellowed slightly with age, but still folded neatly, like the moment itself had been preserved. Reagan unfolded the cloth with trembling fingers, and there it was, Daniel's compass, the one he had given away on a winter night, when the world felt too cold, when kindness felt like the only warm thing left. Reagan lifted it into his palm. The metal was cool, smooth, familiar. He ran his thumb across the scratched front, the faded emblem, the dent along the side. Nancy leaned forward. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Reagan shook his head gently. "It's not the compass that matters." He turned it over, eyes softening. "It's the man who gave it to me." Nancy placed her hand over his. Who was he? For a long moment, Reagan didn't speak. His voice felt stuck somewhere deep in his memory. And then he began. He was a stranger. Knocked on our back door in a snowstorm. My mother let him in without hesitation. He was exhausted, lost, carrying something heavy he didn't talk about. Nancy nodded softly, urging him to continue. "He gave me this," Reagan said, lifting the compass slightly. "Said maybe I'd listen to it." I didn't understand what he meant. He paused, breath unsteady. I still didn't. For years. Nancy's eyes warmed with quiet empathy. "What happened to him?" she asked gently. Reagan looked down, voice dropping. "He left the next morning," he said. "Left a note, then disappeared from my life completely." He exhaled deeply, as if trying to steady something inside him. I always wondered who he really was, why he came, why he gave me the one thing he had left from his father. Nancy sat with him in silence, letting him feel the memory fully before speaking. "Maybe," she whispered, "he saw something in you." Reagan smiled sadly. "I was just a kid." "Kids see truth faster than adults," Nancy said. "Maybe he wanted someone to carry his hope because he couldn't." Reagan's breath trembled. "Hope, that." Words settled in his chest like a warm stone, but something still gnawed at him. "Why didn't he keep this?" Reagan asked, staring at the compass. "Why give away the one thing he had left?" Nancy smiled softly. "Maybe he wanted to believe someone else could find direction, even if he couldn't." Reagan closed his eyes, direction. It struck him suddenly, like a quiet chord being plucked in his chest. And then, out of nowhere, another memory surfaced, something he hadn't thought of in decades. He remembered the way Daniel had held his chest that night. He remembered how he winced when he bent down to take off his boots. He remembered the tremor in his hands, the way his breathing grew shallow when the fire warmed him. He remembered how Daniel had said, "I needed to get through tonight." Reagan's eyes widened slightly. "Nancy." She leaned closer. "What is it?" "I think," Reagan whispered, voice cracking. He was dying. Nancy's face softened, sadness flickering through her eyes. "Oh, Ronnie." He didn't say it, but I see it now. The way he breathed, the way he held himself. He wasn't just cold, he was sick. Very sick. Nancy touched his arm gently. "You and your mother gave him warmth, shelter, kindness. Maybe the last kindness he ever knew." Reagan's breath caught. The truth hit him all at once, clear, painful, beautiful. "That's why he gave it away," Reagan whispered. "Not because he didn't need it, but because he knew he wouldn't be traveling anymore." Nancy closed her eyes, letting that truth settle between them. Reagan held the compass to his chest, and then something inside him unlocked, "I think," he said slowly. "He wanted it to point me somewhere he couldn't go." Nancy squeezed his hand, and did it. Reagan blinked, tears welling unexpectedly. "In a way, yes," he whispered. "Every time I felt lost, every time I doubted myself, every moment I tried to choose kindness over frustration, I think I was following something from that night." Nancy rested her head on his shoulder. "People leave gifts we don't understand," she murmured, "until we look closely. Reagan nodded slowly. For the first time in 30 years, the compass didn't feel heavy. It felt warm, purposeful, alive. He turned it gently, watching the needle settle north. Nancy watched him with soft eyes. "What will you do with it now?" Reagan smiled, a quiet, emotional, almost boyish smile. "I'll keep it," he said, "but not hidden anymore." He closed the compass gently and placed it back in the wooden box. But this time, he didn't shut the lid. He let it stay open. Nancy placed her hand over his. "Do you think Daniel knew?" Reagan asked softly. "What that moment would mean to me one day?" Nancy smiled. "I think he hoped." Reagan nodded, swallowing hard, and then, with a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke the truth he had carried for 30 years. He wasn't just a stranger. He was a reminder. Nancy squeezed his hand. Of what? Reagan looked out the window, watching the last golden light fade across the sky, that even when life feels directionless, he lifted the compass, the needle steady and sure. Someone can still help you find your way. Nancy smiled through gentle tears. "And you did," she whispered. "You found your way, Ronnie." Reagan placed the compass gently back into the box and closed the lid, not to hide it, but to protect it. This time, the sound of the lid wasn't a goodbye. It was a thank you to a stranger who walked into his life for one night and stayed there for 30 years. If this story touched your heart, your like, comment, and subscription helped keep these quiet memories alive and bring more gentle stories to those who need them. Thank you for listening.